Welcome everybody to the Cheech and Kern. I messed up. Hey guys, welcome everybody. Wait, no, I fucked that up.
Oh, fuck.
I'm just gonna wait. Of course, he's wrestling Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Boy, you know, he was kind of built all around. You know, he had those huge thighs. You know, they kind of went well with his whole body. That kind of sounded gay, but you know.
Just a little bit.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Cheech, alongside my main man, Kern. What up, Kern?
What up, Cheech? What's going on?
Nothing much. We're here, back bigger, better than ever on the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast. And today we got a special episode for you guys. We're going to do our Dusty Rhodes tribute show. Now, of course, this is about a month removed after Dusty Rhodes has passed away. But we decided to do this show now, you know, give some time to kind of think about Dusty Rhodes. And everybody's kind of doing their own Dusty Rhodes tribute show, so we decided to wait a little bit to do it. But here it is, the Dusty Rhodes tribute show. And before we go on, Kern, give me a little bit about your thoughts about Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. He's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Dusty Rhodes, a former NWA World, three-time NWA World Champion. He's been in the business forever. Loved him because when I started watching wrestling, which was in the mid-'80s, he was in a feud with the Four Horsemen. And I loved the Horsemen back then. Ric Flair was like my all-time favorite. And the feud he had with Dusty Rhodes was remarkable. I mean, that's what made me start watching wrestling and love wrestling, was the Dusty Rhodes Ric Flair feud. Dusty Rhodes is, you know, one of the best minds out there in wrestling. One of my favorite moments was when he turned heel and joined the NWO in '98. That was one of my favorite moments of Dusty Rhodes. Nobody was expecting, nobody seen it coming. And Dusty Rhodes, I mean, he held everything you could imagine. The world title, the U.S. title, the TV title, tag team title, six-man titles. You name it, he's held it. One of the all-time favorites. Love Dusty Rhodes. I'm sad to hear he passed away.
Yeah, when you think about it, like you said, he's held every kind of title manageable except in WWF. I don't think he ever won a title in WWF, did he?
No, not that I remember. Maybe back in the 70s. I know he wrestled a little bit in the 70s in the WWF, but I'm not too familiar about that back then. But I know when he came back in the late 80s, he'd never won a title in the WWF. But he was still loved by everybody.
He still got over with the polka dots, the common man gimmick.
The common man gimmick.
He had a great feud there with Macho Man back in WWF days, and I like that feud a lot. The Macho Man.
I agree. They were bringing in Elizabeth, and at the time Elizabeth wasn't, you know, with the Macho Man. He was with Sensational Sherry.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And I was reminiscing a little bit about Dusty Rhodes when I heard his passing, and I went back and I found a PWI 500 magazine from the year 2000. Now, this was the PWI magazine where it had Triple H was number 1 and The Rock was number 2. And I just started going over it for no reason, and I found that back in the year 2000, now let's get this straight, Dusty Rhodes started wrestling in the 70s, right? Early 70s, maybe late 70s, I'm not too sure when he started wrestling,
right.
But I know it was in the 70s. And, you know, so at the year 2000, he had to been close to 30 years wrestling. And I went back and I started watching this ranking from PWI 500, and Dusty Rhodes was ranked 210 back in 2000. I mean, a guy that's been wrestling for 30-something years or 20-something years at that time, you know, ranked 210. And I started thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, who was Dusty Rhodes fighting back in the year 2000? And I couldn't remember, so I had to go back and I read the magazine. And it actually, this is what it says here. It says, the American Dream is back. 3-time former NWA World Heavyweight Champ looked like the Dusty of old in his feud with Steve Corino. Was the first man to bloody Corino in ECW. The king of old school tasted quite a few bionic elbows from Rhodes in 2000. Soundly defeated Corino in a bull rope match at the Living Dangerously pay-per-view. Looked good in a few tag team matches with Tommy Dreamer early in the year, but it doesn't seem like that Dusty will be pursuing any tag team gold at this stage of his career. The year 2000, Kern, did you ever get to watch that match with Steve Corino and Living Dangerously?
Yeah, I remember. I didn't watch it live, but I do remember watching that match, watching Dusty Rhodes. He did look good. Actually, he looked kind of chunky, but he came out with his jeans and his cowboy boots, and he was ready to kick ass and take names, which was kind of good because, you know, Dusty had been gone for a while. He had left WCW and ended up in ECW for some reason, but it came out all right. But yeah, when you were mentioning that to me about the 2000, he was ranked 200 and something. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Who was he fighting in 2000? I don't remember that. Because he actually stopped wrestling. Wasn't it like in 90 or 91 when he left the WWF?
Yeah. I guess he stopped wrestling as a full-time performer back at that time, but he would come in every time. Well, did he ever have a match in WCW after that when he came back? I don't think he had a singles match, did he?
I don't think so. He might have got in, you know, a couple of bumps here or there, but I don't think he ever had a match.
An official match, yeah. Well, the late great Dusty Rhodes. So, yeah, it's a sad day in wrestling. We miss, you know, for this guy like that is gone. But we still got his memory. So yeah, so that's what we're here. We're gonna do a tribute for Dusty Rhodes, and
Hall of Famer Dusty Rhodes.
Hall of Famer Dusty Rhodes. That is right. And the show we decided to choose to tribute Dusty Rhodes is a show that's not, you know, you would think about, well, why would we choose this show? It was actually NWA Starrcade 1987 Chi-Town Heat. Now this show, you might figure like, well, wait a minute, why didn't you guys choose a Starrcade 84 or 85 when he was headlining with Ric Flair? Well, we're like, you know what? We decided to take this match because this is when he actually won the U.S. heavyweight title from Lex Luger in a steel cage match. So, yeah, so what do you think about this this event, Kern, this whole event as a whole, before we really get into it, as a tribute to Dusty Rhodes?
Well, I think it's a good tribute. Well, because 84 and 85, when he fought in Starrcade, he never won the title, so officially never won the title. Let's put it that way. And in this cage match against Lex Luger, he actually became victorious, winning the U.S. title. So that's why I think it's a good show for a tribute to Dusty. But at the whole overall show, I think it's a decent show, and we're about to start talking about it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Now let's get right into it. NWA Starrcade 1987 Chi-Town Heat. Now this was, of course, on November 26, 1987. It was Thanksgiving Day. This was at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, Illinois, and it had an attendance of 8,000 fans were in there. Our commentators were Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. We had a couple of interviewers.
That's probably a sellout there, because the UIC Pavilion only sits about 9,500 people.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I think Jim Ross actually mentioned it in his broadcast. What's a sellout? But sometimes you don't know if to believe the commentators or not, because they might be selling that, you know, just saying that.
Well, yeah, because early in the show, when they started the show, this arena was still filling up. So when he was saying there's a start, you know, it's a sellout, and I'm looking at, you know, 15 or 20 empty seats in the front row. That's
right, because when you would see like you could see kind of midway through the aisle, and you would see like a couple seats empty. I'm like, I don't know if this is a legit sellout, but as the show progressed, you did see the seats filling out.
Yeah, the show progressed. It did fill up. The arena was sold out.
So we had interviewers here were Bob Cotto and Missy Hyatt, and they were, you know, doing some backstage segments here and there. But let me give you a little bit of a background setting here for this event here. And this was the first event to be presented in pay-per-view form. The previous Starrcade events were in closed circuit television. It also presented wrestlers from the recently purchased Universal Wrestling Federation, the UWF. Kern, what do you know about the UWF?
UWF, wow, that was Bill Watts' attempt to try to become a major promotion, and it failed. He couldn't secure a good TV show, and Jim Crockett ended up buying him out in 1987. Well, mind you, UWF wasn't around that long. It was one of Bill Watts' companies that he made it, tried to make it universal, like, you know, Jim Crockett and Vince McMahon. It didn't really work out for him, and because UWF, if I'm not mistaken, was only around for like a year.
Wow, that's short of a time. I do have some memories of the UWF, but not that many. So yeah, the UWF, but they had recently been bought out by NWA. So this is the first event that presented these two wrestling companies as one. The other interesting fact about this was that the WWF at the same time presented a pay-per-view called Survivor Series. This was the first ever Survivor Series, 1987. And the weird part about this, Vince McMahon was kind of an asshole back then because what he did was he went to the cable companies and he's like, I'm going to run Survivor Series 1987. It's going to be on Thanksgiving night and you guys are going to run this event exclusively because if you don't, I will not let you run WrestleMania 4. This was kind of, this caused, of course, it caused some buy rates issues for NWA Starrcade 1987. You know, when you look about it, when you think about it, or when you look at the results, Survivor Series did a hell of almost double the buy rates that Starrcade did at that year. And it was because of that, because, you know, the big cable companies wanted to get WrestleMania because that was the big money draw at that time.
You know, what makes me laugh is this. As a cable company owner, right? Mm-hmm. Why would you let Vince McMahon bully you into making you have to accept an offer for WrestleMania? Because if he can't put WrestleMania on pay-per-view, he's not making any money.
That's right. That's right. But I guess wrestling was such a hot commodity back then that it was like, you know what, I guess, I don't know. He just had a lot of leverage. He had a lot of leverage back then. WrestleMania had been so successful at that time. Of course, coming out of WrestleMania 3 where it had Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, you know, 93,000 people were in there. So I guess he had the leverage. He had the leverage, and he was able to use that leverage, at least for this event. And I think this was actually the last year that Starrcade was held up in November, in the month of November, because after that, I think they moved to December. Am I right on that, Kern?
Yeah, you're correct. And actually, Vince McMahon, being the prick that he is, moved his out of the next year. He moved it back out of Thanksgiving also. And actually, one more note I wanted to bring about this Starrcade. This was the first Starrcade that they did outside of North Carolina on its own.
They did it in Chicago.
Right, because 86 they were in the Omni and in Charlotte, but 87 was the first time where they left Charlotte and went to Chicago.
Now, cheap plug here, since you mentioned 86, we did do a review on Starrcade 86. It's one of our previous episodes, so I suggest you guys to go back in our archives and check that out. Now, if you guys are wondering where you can find our archives, all of our MP3 podcast archives are at cheechandkern.proboards.com. We've created a wrestling forum there where you guys can go check it out. We created a forum where you guys can join. You can talk about wrestling. You can talk about WWE, Lucha Underground, TNA, WCW, old pay-per-views, ECW, whatever you guys feel like talking about wrestling is all there. You guys can join in, create your own threads, and we'll talk about wrestling there, have a good time. And you'll find each and every one of our episodes up there at cheechandkern.proboards.com. Now, Kern, before we get into this, this event, Starrcade 1987, I should say, as we get into the Starrcade 87, the first match here was Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin, and Sting. This was kind of weird because, of course, they were accompanied by Precious, but this was kind of weird because I did not expect Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin, the Fabulous Freebirds. They were faces here. I've kind of always seen them as heels. Or am I mistaken? Maybe I'm on crack here, but I think they were always heels, weren't they?
No, they weren't always heels. They were faces back in Texas in WCCW, World Class. Then they turned heels when they were feuding the Von Erichs.
Okay.
And they were both. I remember them both. But when it was Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts and Michael Hayes, that usually was the heel group of the Freebirds.
Okay, yeah, because I think of the Freebirds, and I usually think of a heel stable for some reason. But it was a good going back and watching this, I was like, oh, they're actually faces here. So it was a good, an interesting, oh my God, interesting change for once watching these guys play as baby faces.
Well, let me give you a little insight on this. Why Sting is joining Michael Hayes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, let me know that.
This was Eddie Gilbert, Rick Steiner, Larry Zbyszko, and Sting were from the UWF. Everybody don't remember that, but Sting came from the UWF to show up at the NWA. Everybody thinks he showed up at the NWA and became a star. No, he was at the UWF. He got betrayed by Larry Zbyszko and Eddie Gilbert. Okay. And then as they were beating the shit out of him on the ring, the Fabulous Freebirds came out and helped him. And that's how this match came out, to have the Fabulous Freebirds versus Sting against the UWF guys, which was Larry Zbyszko, Rick Steiner, and Eddie Gilbert.
Of course.
So in case anybody's wondering what Sting's doing with the Fabulous Freebirds back
That's
then.
Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that because, some people might be thinking about that. Actually, I didn't know why he was there. So, but that's good. And Larry Zbyszko was accompanied by Baby Doll. Now,
The perfect 10.
The perfect.
You know, it's funny when they call her the perfect 10, because, man, that bitch was not pretty at all. She was ugly.
I guess it was part of her gimmick, though. Now, I got a little question for you, Kern. I was watching this going back in 1987. I seen Rick Steiner. And the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, why is Rick Steiner in this match alone? Where the hell is Scott?
Okay, oh yeah, Scott Steiner wasn't wrestling at the time. Scott Steiner was actually teaching science teaching back then.
Okay, so he wasn't wrestling.
No, Scott Steiner didn't start wrestling to, I believe it was 88. And then the Steiner brothers, for the first time, joined forces was January of '89 when they started a feud with the Road Warriors.
Okay, because I remember Rick Steiner, and I've always seen him, you know, with the ear covers on, his head protecting gear for the wrestling, and the Michigan colors and everything. And I seen him here, and he had just kind of like those regular wrestling tights, not wrestling tights. I guess they're like those short wrestling tights, the one big pop-up pump. Yeah, the one big pop-up pumps we wear on later on in his career, something like that. And he was just and he was jacked as ever. And I was like, wait a minute, where's Scott Steiner? So that was kind of weird. So I'm glad you gave us a little insight there that Scott Steiner had yet to become a professional wrestler at this time.
Right, and actually, Rick Steiner was with the Varsity Club. And that's where he made his name in wrestling, was with the Varsity Club. I don't know if everybody remembers the Varsity Club back in the 80s.
Yeah, we mentioned the Varsity Club in a couple of previous of our episodes also. So you guys who are new to the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast, I suggest you guys go back and check out our old shows and kind of see the shows we've been talking about. We mentioned these guys at one point or another throughout our shows. So yeah, so
once again, anybody that wants to recommend a show that they would like to be in the podcast, you can email us at cheechandkern@gmail.com.
That's right, cheechandkern@gmail.com. Send your questions, comments, and feedback there. All right, Kern, so let's get right into this first match. And basically, I'm going to go throughout the notes of the match, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in this match. And so the match starts with Steiner surprising Sting early with a pair of Steiner liners. He tries a third one, but Sting sidesteps him and lets Steiner fall out to the floor so he can deliver a plancha. Sting throws Steiner back in the ring and comes off the top with a missile drop kick. It was so crazy that it caused a six-man brawl. The Freebirds and Sting dumped the UWF guys for a huge reaction off the crowd. Once the action settles down, the Freebirds tag in and out, dominating Rick Steiner. He finally crawls back into his corner and tags Zbyszko to take on Garvin. After those two go to it for a bit, Hayes tags in and does a little strut and moonwalk. Gilbert tags in and he gets owned by Hayes. So he tags in Sting. He controls over Gilbert's arm, but then Gilbert slams out of an armbar and tags in Steiner. Sting immediately catches Steiner on his way in and looks at an armbar. Garvin gets a bind, tag, and comes in for a sunset flip for a 1-2 count. They lock up and end up in a heel side of town as Zbyszko tags in and pounds Garvin in the corner. The heels do a little cheating before Gilbert tags in to control Garvin. He hits an atomic drop and starts stomping on Garvin's lower back before he delivered a backbreaker for a 2 count. Gilbert sets up for an elbow drop, but Garvin moves out of the way. Steiner tags in to cut off Garvin from reaching his corner and delivers a power slam for another 2 count. Steiner misses at a charge to the corner, but is still able to keep Garvin from getting to his corner and tags in Zbyszko. He comes in and puts Garvin in an abdominal stretch. Garvin hip tosses it out of it and makes in the hot tag to Sting. The crowd is going nuts. He does okay against all three of the UWF guys for a while, but then Zbyszko rakes Sting's eyes. Gilbert becomes the legal man and tosses Sting over the top rope and out to the floor. Now wait a minute, he tosses him over the top rope. Wasn't this a disqualification at that time?
Well, yeah. Well, you know, when the heels, what they do is when they throw you over the top rope to make sure the referee's not looking, they get the crowd wild up. But yeah, back then it was a disqualification.
Exactly, but the ref did not see it, so back in, Gilbert delivers a suplex for another 2 count. Zbyszko tags in and tries a suplex of his own, but Sting blocks it and delivers one of his own. Steiner gets in, tags in, stomps Sting down in the corner. He whips Sting into the ropes and applies a sleeper. But Sting quickly counters out and driving Steiner's face into the top turnbuckle. And when he hit the top turnbuckle, I thought he broke his neck because Rick Steiner hit that top turnbuckle and his head just like a whiplash effect.
He almost pulled a Owen Hart there.
That's right. Zbyszko gets another tag, but whips his in reverse to send him chest first into the corner. He tags in Gilbert just as Sting makes a hot tag to Hayes. Crowd's going nuts. This causes another 6-man brawl so that JR can pull out "It's Breaking Down in Chi-Town" line for the first match. Sting and Garvin set up a 10-corner punches while Hayes hits a bulldog on Sabisco for a 2 count as the ref notices that Sabisco had his leg draped over the top rope. Hayes celebrates early because he thinks he's won, but the match resumes as Hayes locks the sleeper hold, but Gilbert breaks it up and to a double axe handle. Steiner tags in and grabs a bear hug and then releases Hayes into a belly-to-belly suplex for a 2 count. Gilbert tags in and goes down for an inside cradle for Hayes for another 2 count. It turns to a big brawl at the end once Hayes gets a sunset flip in the last 3 seconds of the match. The ref counts 1, 2, boom, time expires, and we get a 15-minute time limit draw on this first match. People are going nuts. It was kind of a flat finish a little bit when you think about it, but it was a real hot match.
I think it was a great match. I mean, the crowd was going wild throughout the whole match. I mean, they had some spots where all hell just broke loose. You had JR sitting there going crazy. I think it was a good match. I like the ending, actually. I think it kept the feud going because this was, UWF invading NWA kind of gimmicky thing they were going there. So it kind of kept the feud still alive and going there with the time limit draw. And I think they played it out perfect because it actually ended before the referee's hand hit down for the 3 count, which was just fucking priceless. I mean, you don't see stuff like that anymore. I thought it was a great match to start off the show, and the crowd was going wild, so I think the crowd agreed.
And the way I liked it was because every couple of minutes, you would hear the ring announcer saying the time that had gone by. 5 minutes gone out of the match, 10 minutes gone out of the match, 12 minutes, final minute, so you build that anticipation. The people are going nuts like, oh, you gotta do the pin, you gotta do the pin. And they would start pinning the 1, 2, get the final, the fake finishes here, and people started going nuts until the end when they thought Michael Hayes had that final pin. And just as the referee's third hand is coming down, we get the time limit draw and the match ends. Crowd's going hot, and I think it was a great start for Starrcade 1987.
I think it was a great start too. And talking about that, when he flipped him over the top rope, that NWA rule where if you get thrown over the top rope, it's a disqualification. That's going to come into play later on in the show.
That's right. That is going to come into play later on in the show, but we're going to get to that a little later on. But then after that, Kern, we go to our second match, and it was the UWF champion at the time. It was Dr. Death, Steve William, going up against the NWA Western States Heritage champion, Barry Windham. And you mentioned the Western States Heritage champion at one point before in one of our podcasts. Am I right about that, Kern?
Yep, the Western States Heritage Championship is a championship that didn't last too long. I mean, Barry Windham introduced that title back in, I believe it was 87. And then he feuded with Larry Zbyszko. Larry Zbyszko won it time. Then Barry Windham won it back, and that's the last you ever heard of the belt.
Huh. Well, interesting there. Well, here, the UWF belt is what's on the line here. And it was retired shortly after this match, I must say. And the match starts off with a crisscross that ends with Dr. Death delivering a big hip toss to win him. He slips out of the press slam for Dr. Death and gets a roll-up for a 2 count. They do a little mat wrestling, which ends up with both of them out to the floor. Back in the ring, Dr. Death counters out a headlock with a black suplex. Then Windham decides to go for a gut-wrench suplex, and he gets it. Dr. Death has had enough, and he locks in a headlock. Dr. Death was kind of pissed off because, Dr. Death was the big, strong guy, and Windham getting over with a gut-wrench suplex kind of pissed him off. So then Windham makes several attempts to get free from the hold, and Windham finally gets free on the 3rd try. They run the ropes for a little bit, that little crisscross running there for a little bit. Dr. Death gets crotched by a leapfrog by Windham. He's trying to jump up, and Windham just headbutted him in the balls. I don't know if you noticed that. And I think it was a legit headbutt because Dr. Death was hurting. He was grabbing his package like, oh my God, and the people were egging Windham on, like take advantage, win this match, and he didn't want to. He was playing like the good sport here, and he didn't want to do that. So then everyone in attendance, as I said, wanted Windham to get the advantage. He didn't want to do that. They lock back up and do a headlock sequence. They run the ropes again, and Dr. Death ducks a charge and lets Windham flip over the top rope and out to the floor. Now, this wasn't a disqualification because Dr. Death did not throw him. Windham, just his momentum carried him over the top rope, so he fell on the outside. He got a little hurt on the floor, and then they go back in. Dr. Death grabs Windham and cradles him up for a quick pin, 6 minutes, 50 seconds. This match was over before it started, and it was kind of confusing. I guess they were trying to play out that Dr. Death did take advantage of the situation, while Barry Windham didn't. That's kind of the story they were trying to say.
I believe that's what they were going. Steve Williams was the heel there, He was the UWF championship, UWF champion. I mean, that belt don't really mean much because, like I said, the company was only around for a year, and it was a quick match, and it looked like a filler match to me. Because why would Barry Windham be challenging for the UWF? Wouldn't they have like the last #1 contender for the UWF champion?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, but it was. I don't know. It was just, as you say, it was just kind of a filler match because it took less than 7 minutes. The 7 minutes they were in there, they really did not do anything because Dr. Death was holding his balls for like 2 minutes after he got headbutted in them. So they really didn't do much in that match. But it was a so-so match at the time.
Yeah, it was all right.
Then after that, we go to the NWA US Tag Team Champions match, the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette and Big Bubba Rogers versus the Rock and Roll Express. And guess what, Kern? This was a non-title scaffold match.
Non-title scaffold match. God, we were talking about this last time with the '86 scaffold match. I mean, it was a good concept at the time, but I'm glad it didn't last too long because those matches are really nothing. They're just boring people standing on top. You know, not much there to talk about.
Exactly. When you think about it, as I mentioned before in our Starrcade 1986 review, as a kid, I loved the concept. Watching it now as an adult, I don't think it was so great after all. But yeah, let's get right into this match. And before the match starts, Ricky Morton gets up to the scaffold. Bubba Rogers attacks and gives him a bubble slam. Now this is, as you know, the Midnight Express, they got off the scaffold, right? And this other guy, not Ricky Morton, what's the other guy's name from the Midnight Express?
Robert Gibson.
Robert Gibson. He goes up there. And Ricky Morton, as he's going up, Big Bubba just grabs him and does a bubble slam right in the middle of the ring. So that leaves Robert Gibson all alone with Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton up on the scaffold. Bubba tries to climb up to the scaffold, but somehow Morton has Cornette's racket and beats Bubba back down the ladder. Morton climbs up to the scaffold and brings the tennis racket with him. He squares off with Eaton while Gibson hammers away on Lane. Gibson is busted open after getting his head slammed into the scaffold, and Eaton is busted open by the way of the tennis racket. Eaton tosses some powder into Morton and Gibson's face to try and take them off the scaffold. Gibson tries to toss Lane off the scaffold, but Eaton comes over to save him. Eaton grabs the tennis racket and floors Morton and then goes over to Gibson, but Gibson has a piece of the railing. He nails Eaton in the face with it, sending the racket down to the ring. Now this was kind of nuts. He kind of grabbed a piece of the railing of the scaffold and he just swung. And that was just hilarious. The guy just throws himself on the floor. He's like, wait a minute, no. Meanwhile, Lane nearly gets eliminated and hangs onto the ladder. Bubba tosses the racket back up to Eaton while Morton and Lane fight underneath the scaffold. Gibson takes the tennis racket away from Eaton and decks him with it. Morton finally kicks Stan Lane back into the ring for the first elimination. So that we got Stan Lane back in the ring. He's eliminated. Morton climbs back up to the scaffold and meets Eaton with a right hand. Gibson tries to toss Eaton over the edge while Morton hits him with the tennis racket. Eaton goes underneath the scaffold and hangs on it until he falls to the mat below to give the Rock and Roll Express the win. 10 minutes, 23 seconds. Then after that, Cornette tells Big Bubba Rogers to go up and throw Gibson and Morton off the scaffold. Gibson gets halfway down the ladder while Morton accepts Bubba's challenge. Morton points out to the crowd to distract Bubba and nails him in the balls. He then shoots down the ladder, then escapes the big man's wrath. Now this was kind of weird. The match ended, Big Bubba Rogers, he goes up the scaffold, and I'm like, oh, somebody's gonna take a badass bump from this, from this event here. And then after that, we just see Big Bubba Rogers go up. He gets hit in the balls by Ricky Morton. Now, those of you guys hear in the background music, that's some car passing by there, so excuse me on that. But Ricky Morton, he hits him in the balls, and he lays down and he goes down like a bitch on the scaffold. What do you think about that, Kern?
Well, first of all, I knew his big ass wasn't going to fall off that scaffold because he can seriously hurt himself.
I was kind of expecting it.
Yeah, he's too big. You were expecting it. I was expecting it. I think everybody was expecting it. But in reality, he wasn't going to fall off that top scaffold up there. I mean, once again, I don't really like the scaffold matches. I mean, they're not that interesting anymore. Somebody can seriously get hurt. Just ask Jim Cornette.
That's right.
And if you ask me, I think last year's show, the '86 Starrcade, was better with the Road Warriors than having the Midnight Express against the Rock and Roll Express. I think the Road Warriors gave it a little bit more credibility of scariness to the fight, being in a scaffold match. Yeah, but I think it was a decent match, nothing to write home about. And I'm glad that was the last time we ever seen a scaffold match.
Yeah, that's true. And if you think about it, when we saw this match in Starrcade 1986, the scaffold was a lot higher than when you see it here in 1987. I mean, it was a good 2 or 3 feet higher. I mean, of course, I'm just judging and watching it by a TV screen, but it seemed a lot higher in 1986 than in 1987. And also the walking scaffold part where they had, it was a little wider. The 1986 one looked a little, well, at least that's what I seen. Now, of course, we had the Road Warriors up there, which are huge guys, so they might have made it look a little smaller. But yeah, this match, I'm glad it was over with. It was a quick match, 10 minutes, 23 seconds, nothing special, and yeah, that's about it. And our next match, Kern, is the UWF Television Championship match. And it was, no, wait, I'm sorry. It was the title unification match where we unify
title versus title.
It would unify the UWF Television Champion and it would with the NWA World Television Champion. And of course, the UWF Television Champion was Terry Talor, and he was accompanied with Eddie Gilbert against the NWA World Television Champion Nikita Koloff.
You know, a little bit background before we get into the match. I remember watching this feud as it was breaking out. The NWA had just purchased UWF, and Terry Talor was arguing with Nikita Koloff that his television title was better than the NWA television title. And at one point during the feud, Terry Talor stole Nikita Koloff's belt and took off with it, and he was going to different places, showing off that he was the best champion, best television champion. And that's what led to the unification match here at Starrcade 87 for TV title versus TV title.
And before we get into this match, I think this was the best match in NWA Starrcade, and you're going to see why as we go into this match right now. So the match starts off with Talor trying to get a cheap shot out of the corner, but Nikita blocks it and gives Talor a death stare. Nikita reverses a wrist lock into one of his own and hooks an armbar, but Talor jumps out to the apron and calls for a break. Instead of breaking the hold, Nikita pulls Talor back in and reapplies the armbar. JR does a good job of putting Nikita's strength by saying that Nikita is so strong that even an elementary hold like an armbar could cause a man to submit. Talor fights out with some headbutts, but then Nikita no-sells a headbutt to the buckle. Nikita cross-corner whips Talor and hooks on another wrist lock. Talor tries to punch out, but Nikita no-sells and changes to a hammerlock. Talor counters into a hammerlock of his own, but Nikita quickly elbows out of it and returns to the hammerlock. Talor gets to the ropes and rolls out of it to his buddy Eddie Gilbert. Talor gets back in and goes nose to nose with Nikita. They trade and slap, and Nikita pounds on the arm. Backdrop by Nikita gets a 2 count, and Talor rolls out again. Nikita pulls Talor back in by his hair, but then he runs into a knee out of the corner. Talor tries to get a cheap win by rolling Nikita up and using the ropes for leverage, but Nikita gets his shoulders up at 2. Nikita gets right back on top and applies the hammerlock once again. The hammerlock, you see where we're going here? He's applied like 10 different hammerlocks in the match.
No shit.
He tries to hook Talor over into a pin attempt with a half Nelson, but Talor gets on the ropes for the break. Talor goes to the eyes, but he misses an elbow drop. Nikita gets back up and returns to the armbar. Talor fights out again, but this time with a headbutt, but then gets choked down by Nikita. He sets up for the Russian sickle, but Talor avoids it and lets Nikita charge into the corner. Talor pushes Nikita out to the ringside and throws him into the guardrail, then follows it up by applying a hammerlock, another hammerlock, and shoving Nikita shoulder first into the ring post. Back in, Talor slings Nikita's arm across the top rope as the crowd chants, "Nikita, Nikita!" Gilbert slings Nikita's arm across Nikita's arm across the apron while Talor distracts Earl Hebner. Talor delivers a pair of knee drops and covers for a 2 count. Nikita tries to elbow Talor away, but he uses his hurt arm. Talor capitalizes and torques the arm by using the ropes. Nikita punches out of a sunset flip, but Talor is right back on top of Nikita. He tries a suplex, but Nikita blocks and returns the favor. Nikita starts to no-sell, his head being driven into the turnbuckle and goes up for a 10-count corner punch. He just starts dragging Nikita's head into the turnbuckle, boom, boom, and Nikita's just looking at it like, seriously? He starts no-selling it. Talor counters, and after that, with a 5 internal inverted atomic drop for a 2 count, Talor gets into a tiff with Hebner about the count, so Nikita seizes the moment and rolls him up for a 2 count. Talor gets right back in and stomps up Nikita to set up a pile driver, but Nikita backdrops out of it. Talor rolls out of the ring to sucker Nikita so he can be the first man to enter the ring. Talor nails Nikita on his way in, allowing Eddie Gilbert to hit Nikita in the back with his left knee. The camera missed a shot, but I'm guessing he jabbed the chair that he's sitting in to the back of his knee, because he kind of just like jammed the chair into his knee. That's what I'm assuming, because you couldn't really see it. Talor locks into the figure four, and he even has Eddie Gilbert help out with some leverage. Talor gets a few near falls with the hold, but eventually Hefner sees what's going on, and he makes Talor break it. Gilbert gets involved again with Nikita, but his plan backfires as he collides with Talor. Then out of nowhere, Nikita explodes with a Russian sickle for the 1, 2, 3, 17 minutes, 37 seconds. I thought this was a hell of a match, back and forth. These two guys went at each other with everything they had, especially a lot of hammerlocks. But it was a good match.
Yeah, actually, this was the match of the night. This was the match. I mean, that feud ended greatly. I mean, Nikita Koloff versus Terry Talor, and then Eddie Gilbert sitting in there trying to put in his 2 cents into the match. I think it was a great match. The crowd was into it. And Nikita was a huge fan favorite at the time, after turning from heel to a fan favorite, and he ended up unifying the TV titles.
That's right.
It was a great match. And just to talk about Eddie Gilbert, I mean, Eddie Gilbert was such a great wrestler. You talked about Bruiser Brody. Eddie Gilbert also died in Puerto Rico. He was working in Puerto Rico when he had a heart attack and passed away. Eddie Gilbert was somebody that not too many people know about, because he died at such an early age back in the 90s. But Eddie Gilbert was just as good as Dusty Rhodes or Ric Flair or anybody else out there. He was a great talent.
Every time I hear people talking about Eddie Gilbert, they always have high praise on him. And
he was awesome. He was great. Hot stuff, Eddie Gilbert. He was one of my favorites.
I'm a huge Steve Austin fan, and he usually talks about in his podcast, when he talks about Eddie Gilbert, he always said he had a great mind for the business. And so yeah, Eddie Gilbert, it's a shame he died so young.
Yeah, he was like 33 or 34. He was young.
Yep. After that, Kern, we got our next match, which is the NWA World Tag Team Champions, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, accompanied, of course, by J.J. Dillon. And they would go up head-to-head with the War Warriors with Paul Ellering.
This was a match I was looking forward to. I mean, first of all, the Road Warriors are from Chicago. The match is taking place in Chicago, so they got the whole crowd behind them ready for this match. And it was against the Four Horsemen, which were my favorite group at the time, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, representing the Horsemen in this match. And I actually thought this match started when I was watching it live, or at the time when I was a kid. I was so scared that the Horsemen were going to lose their belts to the Road Warriors.
Well, I mean, the Road Warriors, I would say I was at the other side. I was a fan of the Road Warriors, and I wanted them to beat them. And we'll see what goes on in this match as we go on. So the match starts with the Road Warriors overpower Anderson and Blanchard early on. Blanchard tries to leave, but Hawk brings him back in the ring and drop kicks Blanchard for a 2 count, an early count. Tully catches Animal with a knee out of the corner, but then gets caught coming off the top rope and takes a power slam for a 2 count as Arn breaks up the pin. Arn returns to his corner, but he then gets tagged in and doesn't have any idea what to do against the Road Warrior. It was kind of funny because Arn Anderson is standing in his corner. He has his hand out for Tully Blanchard to pin him, not to pin him, to tag him in. Tully tags him in, and Arn Anderson's like, wait a minute, what the fuck did I just do? Now I gotta get in the ring. He had that look in his face. It was hilarious. Arn battles Animal back into the corner, but Animal reverses a cross corner rip. Anderson flips out of the corner and then goes down to a clothesline. Tully runs in to save as he gets nailed as well. Even after the Horsemen slow down the pace of the match, Arn gets caught with a bear hug. Tully saves him, but then Hawk comes back with a double clothesline. Animal tags in and catches Tully in a bear hug out of a military press from Hawk, and then breaks the hold with an atomic drop. Frustrated, Arn tags back in and tries a pile driver. Animal is able to backdrop out of it and press slam Arn instead. Both men tag out, and Hawk gets clipped by the Horsemen to create the opening for their offensive attack. They're all over Hawk's knee. Tully eventually whips out a steel chair and cracks it across Hawk's knee out on the floor. Back in, Arn hits the DDT and covers for a 1, 2, nope. Tully tags in and tries a figure 4, but Hawk counters with a botched small package for maybe a 1 count. Now Arn tags in and gives a figure 4 a try, but Hawk kicks him into the corner. He missed his cue, but they still were able to pull it off. Arn is still able to keep off of Hawk and tagging Tully before Hawk can make the tag. Blanchard finally gets the figure 4 locked in, but can't make Hawk submit. Arn tags in and does a spot where he tries to get the pinfall out of a knuckle lock, but he gets crotched instead. They make the hot tag the Animal. People are going nuts. He drop kicks Arn, but then gets tripped up by Tully to end the hot streak. Blanchard gets chased into the ring by Hawk and tackles referee Tommy Young out to ringside. Animal backdrops Arn out to the floor, which Tommy Young saw happen over the top rope. Blanchard receives a double clothesline and Arn Anderson gets the Doomsday Device. Earl Hebner comes in, counts the 3 count, 12 minutes, 17 seconds. The crowd's going nuts. The Road Warriors are the new NWA Tag Team Champions. People are going nuts. The Road Warriors, they win the title. They all get happy. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What's going on? Tommy Young, he comes in. He starts talking to Earl Hebner. And he says that Animal has been disqualified for throwing Arn Anderson over the top rope and awards the match to Anderson and Blanchard. Win by disqualification. Still your NWA World Tag Team Champions, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard. This was a dusty finish.
This was a good match. I mean, it was perfect. The Road Warriors came out, got the crowd what they wanted to see. Everybody thought they won the tag team titles. Once again, that over-the-top rope controversy we were talking about earlier. When the referee sees it, it works. When the referee don't see it, if the referee don't see it, it works. If the referee sees it, well, then you're screwed.
Exactly.
And it was a good little swerve there at the end. And it actually kept the rivalry going between the Horsemen and the Road Warriors there.
Exactly. I was watching this. I was like, man, this is a great tribute show for Dusty Rhodes. One, because he wins the U.S. title. We're going to get into that next. But they also have a dusty finish, which he made famous.
Stuff like this is what's missing in wrestling now. These little hinky finishes that they don't do anymore.
Well, they did do the dusty finish on, was it the last pay-per-view? It wasn't the Money in the Bank. The pay-per-view before that, Dean Ambrose actually got the 3-pin count on Seth Rollins and became the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, but it was a dusty finish.
Yeah, for like 10 seconds.
Yeah, they reversed it and gave the title back to Seth Rollins. But yeah, this was a good match. The crowd was nuts. Chicago crowd was. Now, what made this even more interesting is that the Road Warriors, they didn't give a shit and they just left with the belts. Did you notice?
They walked away with the belts anyway.
They took the belts and they left the ring with the belts. So yeah, that was a real good, interesting match. I love this match. Good tag team match.
Yeah, a lot of great heat there going on with the Horsemen there and the Road Warriors being the fan favorites. It was a really good match.
All right, and our next match here is the NWA US Heavyweight Champion, Lex Luger, accompanied by J.J. Dillon, and he's going up against none other, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and this is for the US Heavyweight Championship, and this was none other than a cage match. Kern, what do you think about this match before we get into it?
I like the concept. First of all, Lex Luger was the heel. He had just beat Nikita Koloff for the U.S. title in a dusty finish, you might want to call it, where Lex Luger won because J.J. Dillon threw the chair over the cage and he ended up knocking him out, putting him in the torture rack, winning the belt. Dusty Rhodes is trying to avenge that loss for Nikita Koloff, and he's going up against Lex Luger in a steel cage match for the U.S. title. I thought Lex Luger was one of the coolest U.S. champions at this time. He had it all going for him at the time, and I was expecting to see a really hell of a good match.
That's right, yeah, and as I mentioned before, in a previous podcast, you think of U.S. title, and you think of Lex Luger. I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind is Lex Luger.
Yeah, I consider Lex Luger to be one of the best U.S. champions of all time.
Now, to give you a little bit of a backdrop on this, as you mentioned before, but the interesting part about this one was if Dusty loses this match, his career is over. He couldn't wrestle, I think it was for 6 months or 9 months like that. Something like that they were talking about, that he couldn't wrestle again. And what they were trying to, the selling point of this was, if you're a professional wrestler and you can't wrestle for 9 months, your career is over, basically, because you can't make any money for your family, you can't survive, this and that. That's the way they were selling this whole gimmick match here. So yeah, so then we got Johnny Weaver. He's in ringside, and he is the key holder to the cage at ringside. Then we start out the match. The first 5 minutes, they start going back and forth at each other. Then Luger tries for his jumping elbow drop, but Dusty rolls out of the way and hooks an armbar. Luger comes out of it, but then charges into the corner, and Dusty returns to the arm. Luger goes low and stomps away on Dusty, I should say. The cage finally comes into play as Dusty goes face first into the steel to bust him open. Dusty gets sent into the cage once once more for a 2 count. Luger pounds away on the cut in the corner and then snapmares Dusty down to deliver the jumping elbow drop for a 1-2. Nope. Luger hammers Dusty down to the mat, but Dusty comes back up with a drop kick, or what at least seemed to be a drop kick. Because I mean, Dusty,
to be a drop kick.
but Dusty, I mean, for his weight and his size, he pretty much got up there. Luger doesn't let it get to him too bad, and he connects with a backbreaker, and he sets up for the torture rack. But it turns out that Dusty Rhodes, in my opinion here, he's just too fat, and Luger just couldn't get him up on the torture rack, so he kind of laid him on the top turnbuckle instead. Luger chucks Dusty on the ropes for a 2 count. Luger goes to an armbar, and about 3 or 4 minutes of that, Dusty shakes it loose and hits a bionic elbow. Dusty hits a bad-looking DDT for a 1-2. Nope. Luger goes to the eyes but misses a clothesline and runs into the sleeper. Meanwhile, J.J. Dillon decks Weaver and steals the key. For some reason, he doesn't use the key as he drops it. I think he was going to try to open the padlock. He's trying to open the padlock. I think the key dropped to the ground. As all this is going down, for some reason, Lex Luger is able to hit Earl Hebner. I think he inadvertently hits Earl Hebner. Earl Hebner kind of drops into the corner. He falls to the ground. And so JJ can't find the key. He just throws the chair over the top of the cage, lands right in the middle of the cage. Dusty Rhodes is able to capitalize, grabs Luger, does a DDT on it. Hebner comes to, counts 1, 2, 3. Dusty Rhodes wins the U.S. title. People are going nuts, and Dusty Rhodes wins, I think, one of his final biggest title wins as a single competitor. And
that's right. You know, it's funny. It's karma, because that's how Lex Luger won the U.S. title against Nikita Koloff, was James J. Dillon throwing the chair over the cage and knocking Nikita Koloff out for winning it. And then you live by the gun, you die by the gun, because now the same thing happened. Chair goes flying. James J. throws the chair, goes flying into the cage, but this time Dusty Rhodes capitalizes for the 1, 2, 3. I think it was a good match. I like the bionic elbow, and you know, talking about this Dusty Rhodes match, another great memory that just popped into my head as we were talking about this retirement match if he lost, was, remember when he lost against the Horseman and he had to retire from wrestling? Then he came back in a mask as the Midnight Rider.
That's right.
Everybody knew he was the Midnight Rider, and that was a great Dusty Rhodes. Was when he was the Midnight Rider in '86. I mean, that was beautiful. Then he started tag teaming with oh my God, I can't even remember his Magnum TA.
That's
they
right,
started
Magnum
tag teaming as the James Brothers.
They were still tag team. They tagged up all the way to, I think Magnum got hurt, right? He got hurt in the car accident, and that's about when their tag team eventually had to end, obviously for obvious reasons.
Correct, but that was, I mean, that was a great Dusty Rhodes. Everybody knew it was Dusty Rhodes. You could hear his voice. It was like Hulk Hogan with Captain America. Everybody knew that was Hulk Hogan, but yeah, he kept denying it.
It was kind of like the wink, you know, so to speak.
Right. Another great Dusty memory was that Midnight Rider.
Yeah. Now this is one of the reasons why we picked Starrcade '87 as a tribute show for Dusty Rhodes, because it's such a great memory seeing him win this U.S. title, the way he won it. The way Luger lost it, so to speak. Crowd goes nuts. They had a Dusty finish in the pay-per-view. So I think it was a decent way for this match to go down and Dusty Rhodes to win the U.S. title. Now, give me a little bit of story, if you can. Give me a little bit of a future story here. Did Dusty hold on to that title for a while?
No, I don't believe Dusty held that title too long, because I believe Lex Luger ended up winning it back. I'm not 100% sure. So,
okay.
You know. But I'm quite confident Dusty didn't hold the belt that long.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, so then after that, Kern, after that great cage match, we go to another cage match. And this cage match is the main event of the evening. It's the NWA World Heavyweight title on the line. And it's NWA World Heavyweight champ Ron Garvin versus Ric Flair with J.J. Dillon. Now, this was a little head-scratcher for me, Kern. Why was Ron Garvin the NWA World Heavyweight champion? You got to give me a little bit of information here, because I was kind of struck here when I seen him come walking down the aisle with that belt. It just did not look right.
Well, I'll tell you what I remember reading and hearing about it was that it being the first Starrcade that the NWA was doing out of Charlotte, they wanted a nice main event. They wanted Ric Flair to win the title, but at the time he was still the champion. So they had to find some goofy that they can just give the belt to for a couple months to kind of hype up the pay-per-view coming up for Ric Flair to win the title. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I heard that there was a couple of big name guys that they wanted to give the belt to, but they refused to get the title because it was going to be just short-lived for a couple of months to lose it to Flair. So Ron Garvin, at that time, he was like in his 40s, at the end of his career. It was like a tribute to Garvin to let him win the world title before he retired, because that was the first and only world heavyweight title he ever held. So I think it was just a tribute to give him the belt on his way out the door, and it hyped up the pay-per-view so they could have Ric Flair winning the title at the pay-per-view.
Okay, but do you think he was a draw? Because I kind of went back and read a little bit about Ron Garvin. I'm like, let me see who this guy is, because I don't really remember him that much. I don't remember him being in any NWA World Title match besides this one. Obviously, he had to be the one when he beat Ric Flair, but I don't remember seeing that match. And I was kind of figuring, and a lot of the stuff I was reading really said that he wasn't a draw, and people really weren't into him as champ. He wasn't believable.
Well, yeah, it wasn't believable at the time. Now, Ron Garvin, I mean, what I remember of Ron Garvin, he was more like a gimmick person. He used to come out in drag, remember, as, he'd come out in drag. He came out as Jimmy Garvin's uncle, bodyguard / whatever the hell you want to call that shit. Okay. I mean, I never liked him, but mind you, when I started watching wrestling in the mid-'80s, Ron Garvin was like towards the end of his career. Okay. So I never seen him wrestle in the 70s or in the 60s or whenever. So I can't really say if he was a great draw. But what I remember of him was the drag queen thing, and it didn't really work out. I don't remember seeing the draw.
Well, that's a fair assumption. I mean, we really didn't see him in his prime, so we can't really judge on that. But we go as what we saw at the time.
Right.
All right, now let me give you a little bit of extra backdrop on this. When Flair regained the NWA World Title for the 4th time from Dusty Rhodes the previous year, he had tied Heat.This for winning the four championships. Now, in this match, he looks to surpass the legend Heat.This and recapture the NWA World Title for a 5th time. Of course, we all know how many times Ric Flair ended up having championship in his career, but here he was going for his 5th title reign. And for Ronnie Garvin, as we mentioned before, this was his one and only shot at the big time. To prove that his title win wasn't a fluke in Detroit, he has to beat Ric Flair once again to be taken seriously. Now, this is kind of, a little extra backdrop of what the information you gave us there. And that's the story we got here. So then the match starts, right? And Garvin starts giving Flair an arm bringer. Garvin backs Flair into the corner and delivers a 10-count corner blows, and then whips Flair into the corner for a backdrop to set up Garvin's stomp. Garvin wins a chop fest. Oh my God, those fucking chops from Ron Garvin, man. They look like they hurt.
Killer chops.
They look like that because he was, Ric Flair does kind of like the little side chop. Woo, he was going straight. He was going straight up and down, and that shit looked like it hurt. Yeah, so Garvin wins the chop fest, but then Flair goes low. Flair follows up with an atomic drop and then pounds on Garvin in the corner. Flair sets up for the rolling knee drop, and it's right on target for a 2 count. Now Flair goes to work on the leg and hits the shin breaker, followed by the figure 4. Flair grabs the middle rope to gain leverage and gets a couple of 2 counts, but Garvin stays with it until he reverses the hold onto the ropes. Flair tries to drag Garvin face first into the cage for the first time in the match as the crowd begins to turn on Garvin. the crowd started chanting, "Garvin sucks! Garvin sucks!" And the chants start to get louder. Garvin makes several blocks and eventually sends Flair into the cage. Flair gets busted open while he gets his forehead grated on the steel. Flair tries to climb out, but Garvin follows him up and smashes Flair's face into the railing. Flair falls back down to the mat to set up a possible top rope sunset flip attempt for Garvin to throw himself, but Garvin didn't throw himself. I guess he wasn't a high flyer or something because he didn't want to go there. That's the way Garvin actually won the title when they fought Ric Flair. Garvin threw himself off the top rope for a little sunset flip, and he beat Flair for the win. But then Flair flaps back down towards the opposite corner to avoid it. Garvin chops away in the corner, but Flair kicks Garvin down and heads up to the top, and of course Flair gets slammed onto the mat. Garvin decides to slap on the figure 4 to Garvin sucks chants. People are still going, "Garvin sucks! Garvin sucks!" Flair makes it to the ropes for the break, but Garvin continues working on the leg. Once Flair gets back into his feet, Garvin chops away and connects with a flying crossbody for a 1-2. Nope. Garvin gets back a backslide for a 1-2. Nope. Flair gets his face grated on the steel again and then chopped in between the ropes and the cage. Flair heads up to the top of the cage again, and Garvin follows him up again and nails him once again on the guardrail. Garvin smashes Flair's face into the railing once again and then causes Flair to crotch himself on top of rope with a headbutt. Garvin remains up on the top turnbuckle to set up the top rope sunset flip. He leaps off, but Flair won't go down. Flair grabs the top rope and falls down on Garvin using the ropes, but referee Tommy Young sees it after the two and pulls Flair off the top rope. Flair falls back and Garvin gets a near fall. Garvin's back into Flair into the corner and chops away before the 10 count corner punches. Flair brings Garvin out of the corner after a few blows and backs Garvin into the opposite corner with Tommy Young getting in the way. Garvin levels Flair with a KO punch for a 1-2. Now this was important, the KO punch, because of course they called Ron Garvin the Man of Steel, Man of Stone, Fist of Stone, something like that was his name.
The man with the fist of stone.
So this was an important part of the match here when he knocks him out with a KO punch and he covers for the 1-2. No, Flair is able to kick out of the knockout punch. Just as Garvin starts to get frustrated, Flair reverses a whip and sends Garvin face first into the cage. Flair falls on top of him. Tommy Young counts 1, 2, 3, gives Flair his 5th NWA World Heavyweight Championship, 14 minutes, 52 seconds. The crowd, again, is going nuts for this.
Well, yeah, the crowd's going nuts because, once again, you know, you're in Chicago. Chicago's a gangster town. And when you bring in somebody like Ric Flair to come in there, as legendary as he was, the cocky, arrogant son of a bitch that he is, and winning the world title again, I mean, that's who you're going to be rooting for. I mean, the match reminded me of pretty much the exact same match when Ric Flair lost the belt to Garvin, the stomping of the sides that Garvin was doing on Flair. I mean, Garvin wasn't really much in the match. I mean, he couldn't really do much. Ric Flair pretty much carried the whole match through. I think it was an okay match. I think it was great to see Ric Flair win the world title, but I think they should have had somebody else besides Ron Garvin win the belt. I mean, they should have gave the belt to somebody from the UWF. You know, Dr. Death Steve Williams or something. That would have been a great main event. Ric Flair, Dr. Death Steve Williams, unification, UF title, NWA title, going at it. I think they should have went that way, but, you know, Ron Garvin was all right, I guess. What do you think of the match?
I actually thought it was an okay match, but it was a short match by Flair standards. I mean, you're used to watching Ric Flair in the ring 35, 45 minutes, back and forth action, right. An hour easily, you know, an hour Broadway, as he calls it, easily. And you know, 15-minute match, cage match, Ron Garvin. I mean, basically, what Ron Garvin did in the match was chop Ric Flair.
He stomped him a couple of times.
He stomped him a couple times. He did the KO punch, which Ric Flair obviously didn't put over because he kicked out of it. But you know, it was an okay match. I was, you know, when I was watching this, I was wondering, like, maybe they only gave it a 15-minute match because it was on pay-per-view, and you know, their time was limited or something like that. But I don't know. I guess it was an okay match. It was a good main event because, I mean, the crowd was nuts. They were hot. Team Ric Flair win the title for the 5th time. And I'm glad I was able to see the match. But, you know, as you say, Ron Garvin, I don't think he was the perfect fit for this. But thinking about your idea, Dr. Death Steve Williams versus Ric Flair unifying those titles, that would have been badass.
Well, yeah, because, you know, the UWF was just purchased. They were complaining back and forth of whose belts were better than the other. What perfect, you know, match to make
champion versus champion. That's right. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Kern.
Because just like you said earlier, once Dr. Death defeated Barry Windham for the belt, I mean, that was it. The title was gone. You never seen it again. So if you would have unified it with the NWA title, then you have a reason why the belt's no longer around.
Exactly. And if you think about it, that Dr. Death match, as we mentioned before, was kind of just a throwaway match with Barry Windham. It really wasn't anything.
Pretty much. Or they should have made a triple threat match or something. I mean, they had the options to do something different there. I mean, it worked out, but it could have been a lot more interesting.
That's true. Totally agree with you on that, Kern. So, yeah, that was it. That was Starrcade 1987. Kern, give me your overall thoughts on the whole show. What would you rate this show out of 10?
Well, I was thinking about it. I'm going to give it a strong 7.
Strong 7. Okay.
Strong 7. I mean, the crowd was going wild. JR was great in the mic. I mean, Ric Flair winning the belt, Dusty Rhodes winning the belt, the Four Horsemen versus Road Warrior thing was great there too. I'm going to give it a strong 7. What do you think, Cheech?
Yeah, yep. I was aiming for a 7.5. So that's we're right around the same area here. 7.5 out of 10. And yeah, I really enjoyed this show. I'm glad we picked this show as a tribute to the late Dusty Rhodes. I think it had real good matches. I enjoyed his U.S. title win. Of course, we had the Dusty finish in the World Warriors match. So yeah, I enjoyed this show. 7.5 out of 10, Kern.
All right, great. So, is it mail time section?
It's time for the mailbag section, Kern.
All right, mailbag section, and it's brought to you by Audible.com, right, Cheech?
That's right. For you, the listeners of the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You guys can download this week's choice, Dusty, Reflection of Wrestling's American Dream, for free, or you can download your choice of audiobook free by trying Audible.com. Just go to www.audibletrial.com/cheechandkern and complete the sign-up process for the 30-day trial. Choose your audiobook and give their service a try. If you're not satisfied, you can cancel anytime during the trial, but guess what? You can keep your free audiobook as our gift to you for being a loyal listener to the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast. Remember, to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/cheechandkern. Again, that's audibletrial.com/cheechandkern for your free audiobook. And of course, as we mentioned, Kern, this is the Dusty Rhodes Tribute Show, so we are recommending when you guys go up and sign up for your free trial on audible.com to check out Dusty Rhodes' book, Dusty, Reflection of Wrestling's American Dream. You know, you guys can check out this book. If you go to the gym, if you're commuting to work, you can just download this book for free. Go check it out, listen to it. Dusty Rhodes' backdrop, his whole career there. This book came out back at, I believe it was in 2005. So it has a lot of information there. Revisit all those great rivalries he had. So yeah, we highly recommend it there. audibletrial.com/cheechandkern.
All right, so we're going with the emails. And we got quite a few emails this week. And first one is from Danny Dunn. Dan from Montreal, Canada. And he actually got a Dusty Rhodes email. He wants to know, who do you think was, or what do you think Dusty Rhodes' greatest feud was? What do you think, Cheech?
Well, you know, going back here to see Dusty Rhodes' greatest feud, I'm not sure. You know, obviously I know Ric Flair, you know, the Horseman is one of their greatest feuds, but I'm going to go back to WWF with Randy Savage. I mean, Dusty Rhodes' whole run in the WWF, when you think about it, really wasn't that much. All he had was the polka dots and Sapphire. But I mean, those matches and that feud he had with Macho Man Randy Savage in WWF, I think was one of his greatest feuds of all time.
All right, that's not a bad feud. I was thinking about that. Well, my favorite feud will be with Ric Flair. I mean, all through the 80s, the Horseman versus Dusty Rhodes was just awesome. The time when they followed him around town and they tied him up to the car, broke his arm, I think it was beautiful. In 80, I think it was 84 or 85 in Starrcade when Flair lost the belt to Dusty, supposedly, because he never actually lost the belt. It came back to Flair the next day. That was one of the best feuds. I mean, the crowd went wild after Dusty won the belt. Everybody came out of the back locker room to help, you know, carry him in the ring. And I think that was one of my favorite Dusty Rhodes feuds, what had been against Ric Flair in the 80s.
Great, yeah, great. As I mentioned, those Randy Savage matches with WWF are just great. I highly recommend anybody who hasn't seen those matches to go back and watch them. You guys will be highly entertained there.
Yeah, those are great matches. All right, our second email comes from Steve Dunlap. Steve is from Pontiac, Illinois. And he also has a Dusty Rhodes question. His question is, who do you think is the better wrestler of Dusty's sons, either Cody or Dustin? What do you think, Cheech?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's an interesting question, but I guess I'll have to go with Dustin, no doubt. It has to be Dustin because, you know, his greatest incarnations throughout the years, the natural Dustin Rhodes. Then you had, of course, Goldust. You know, in my opinion, hands down, it has to be Dustin because Cody is still early in his career, and I think he still hasn't found who he really wants to be.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to have to say Dustin. Dustin's been around for a while. I mean, he's held U.S. titles, tag team titles in WCW. Went to the WWF, ended up winning a couple titles there. And I think it's kind of an unfair question because Cody is still kind of in the beginning of his career, so there's not much out there to say. I mean, he's got a great future ahead of him, I can say that. But so far today, I would have to say Dustin Rhodes is who I think is the better wrestler of
All
Dustin.
right. Pretty good. Now, before we go to our next email, Kern, I got a little bonus here for our listeners. We got a little, Son of a gun, the natural Dustin Rhodes. I love that.
Dustin Rhodes. Wow, that takes me back. I haven't heard that music in a while.
I love one of my favorite theme songs in professional wrestling is that one right there.
Yeah, a little country music for Dustin Rhodes. All right, our third email comes from Iris Martinez. Iris from Chicago, Illinois, and she wants to know, what do you guys think of the new Tough Enough? What do you think, Cheech?
Oh man, I gotta tell you something. I'm a huge fan of Tough Enough. I've always been a huge fan ever since the series made its debut back in I think it was 2000 or 2001. I've always liked watching it, but this season of Tough Enough really isn't doing anything much for me. They have an identity crisis. They don't know what they are. If they're a reality show like The Voice or American Idol, or if they're a professional reality show, I mean, it's just a whole bunch of confusion. Then they go back to the house. They show a whole bunch of drama. Has nothing to do with wrestling. They're voting on people that they're not necessarily performing wrestling maneuvers or wrestling ring or anything. They're just, I mean, they got guys swimming in a fucking lake again with crocodiles going for a belt. I mean, you kidding me? What the hell does that have to do anything with professional wrestling there? Now, I don't know. So I'm watching it. I must say I am watching it because I'm intrigued. I want to see who wins, but it's not anything near of what I expected for Tough Enough.
You know what? Well, I'm going to have to agree with you. I think the Tough Enough now it's first of all, I don't like Jericho as the Tough Enough host, if you want to call it. The show has just changed completely from what it used to be. Before, they were actually in there taking bumps and all this other stuff. So I'm going to have to agree with you, Chief. I don't think the new Tough Enough is as good as the old Tough Enough.
All right. Yep. That's Tough Enough. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's interesting to see who's going to win it. But anyways, when you think about it, where are all the previous winners of Tough Enough before? Where are they now? They're nothing. They never really amounted to anything in WWE or wrestling when you think about it. I mean, where's Andy Levine? He's the last Tough Enough, and he went to WWE. He was there. They released him. He never made his official debut on the main roster. He came over here. I think he's still wrestling in Puerto Rico for WWC, for Carlos Colon's promotion. He has won the title over here a couple of times, but I mean, it's really nothing over, nothing major. The only guy that I think that ever made any real impact was Maven. Where he eliminated The Undertaker at Royal Rumble, and, he won the hardcore title a couple times and everything. And he's actually making a comeback now to wrestling.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, he's making a comeback now in wrestling. So I think he's the only guy that really amounted to much of the Tough Enough winners.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the Tough Enough people that didn't win actually ended up getting contracts in wrestling in the WWE.
Exactly. I mean, think about I guess the one that really comes to my mind is The Miz. The Miz did not win. The guy that won that year was Daniel Puder, and The Miz was the runner-up. And actually, The Miz is the one actually who achieved any kind of stardom, was actually The Miz. And he actually main evented WrestleMania with John Cena, which is hard to believe, but he actually did
with the
main
belt.
Event with the belt, and he won, and he left the championship. So
he left with the belt. Yeah.
So I guess he's the overachiever here is The Miz, definitely.
All right, and email number 4 comes from our good buddy Oliver James in London, England.
Our main man, Oliver.
Oliver wants to know, what do we think of Wade Barrett main eventing the Beast in the East? Do you think they're pushing him for a world title run?
Ooh.
What do you guys think?
All right. Well, I gotta laugh this off because it's that, before I answer that question, let me read another email we received right after our last podcast. And it's from our main man in Spanish Harlem, Tony Culapesta. You guys all know Tony. And
Tony, what's going on, Tony?
This is what he sent over here. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because a little bit of the wording he used here I can't really officially use on the show. But we're going to go with it. It says, "What's up, guys? Just listened to the latest podcast, and I didn't know WWE had a pay-per-view in Puerto Rico." Of course, he's talking about WWE New Year's Resolution. Is it Revolution or I even forgot what the fuck it was called. New Year's Revolution from 2005 that we reviewed in our last pay-per-view.
Correct.
On our last podcast. Now he says this. Now what the fuck is up with Oliver? Hey Oliver, I'm reading it exactly the way he wrote it. What the fuck is on with Oliver? He says that you keep sucking up to Wade Barrett. He said it in another form, but I'm not gonna say it here. You keep sucking up to Wade Barrett, and he says that Wade Barrett will never win the world title. He says he bets Kevin Owens will win the title before Barrett does. And he says that Wade Barrett would have been nothing more than a jobber in WCW. Now, I'm laughing this off.
Get out here.
Yeah, I'm laughing this off because if you guys have been listening to the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast on a consistent basis, you know that my man Oliver James over there is always emailing us from Wade Barrett, and we love it. Hey, keep on sending those emails. We love listening for you guys to send your emails, questions, comments at cheechandkern@gmail.com, and we encourage you guys to send any emails you guys want to send. And our man Oliver is always sending us emails about Wade Barrett. And my man over here, Tony, from Spanish Harlem, he's always he's not too fond of Wade Barrett, you know, and Oliver James is being such a big fan of Wade Barrett. So, you know, we got a little back and forth feud here going on. But, hey, bring it on, baby, because we'll keep reading them. So, so yeah, now we got that out the way. Yeah, Wade Barrett, main eventing, what was the name of the show? It was Beast in the East. Beast in the East. He main evented, of course, that main event for you guys who have watched the show was John Cena and Dolph Ziggler versus Wade Barrett and Kane in the main event. I honestly think they just put Wade Barrett there as a filler. This show originally was supposed to be just a house show, a regular house show, and then they decided to put it on the WWE Network to have Finn Balor win the NXT title. You know, Finn Balor made his career in Japan, so him going back there winning the NXT title, that's why I think they decided to put that on the network. And they just kind of filled it up with John Cena and Dolph Ziggler in the main event. Why? Because people go to the main events, go to the live events, like it or not, to see John Cena. You know, he's the big money draw. He's the man, and people want to see him. And so what they did was they tagged him with Dolph Ziggler and against Wade Barrett and Kane. I don't think they are pushing Wade Barrett. If they would be pushing Wade Barrett, he would be main eventing Monday Night Raw and not a live house show. He would be feuding more, he'd be more consistent in his wins and not jobbing out to R-Truth or these other guys he's been jobbing out to. But I don't know. I mean, Wade Barrett has good potential. You know, I would like them to push him a little bit more, take him a little bit more seriously. But I honestly think that at this point, at this stage, it's just not going to happen.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I think Wade Barrett is a good performer. I don't think they're pushing him to win the world title anytime soon. But Oliver James, if you keep thinking he can win the world title, keep your head up and keep praying, my friend. He can win the world title someday. Hopefully he can go down and win it in England for you.
Exactly. No, and you know what? Hey, Jack Swire won the title for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, whatever it was. So anything can happen.
If Ron Garvin could be world champion, Wade Barrett could be world champion.
Damn it, that's right.
So keep your head up, Oliver. And Tony, sorry. But Wade Barrett, I don't think he's going to do it. And I kind of agree with Tony. I think that Kevin Owens will win the title way before Wade Barrett, but that's kind of a given, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, given that nothing, you know, he doesn't have any injuries or anything, keeping the path that he has. I mean, Kevin Owens came in and he has done one hell of an impact on the main roster, and I am very happy to see him be so successful. I actually bought a Kevin Owens shirt, that whole KO shirt, and it says Fight Owens Fight. I bought that shirt, and I'm going to be wearing that shirt for the live event they're going to have here in Puerto Rico, August 29th. I'm on my way over there to Coliseo de Puerto Rico to watch WWE live. Now, of course, I just realized that night they're going to be running two shows, one of them in Orlando and one of them in Puerto Rico, and we kind of got the B show. John Cena's not going to be over here, but we are going to get Seth Rollins, Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, and a couple of other guys. So hopefully, I want Kevin Owens.
Champ going there. That's not bad.
Well, he's the champ now. We don't know what he's going to be in August. So, and that's after SummerSlam. So we don't know if he's still going to be the champ at that time. But you know, hopefully Kevin Owens will be feuding with one of those guys at that time. You know, he had transitioned over from John Cena, so he can make his way over here. But you know, we'll see. But I'm excited. Hopefully, it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, hopefully it is a good show over there for you. All right, we have one more email, and this comes from Jeff Gibson. You remember Jeff? He was the guy who went to TNA Lockdown in St. Louis.
That's right.
But Jeff Gibson from St. Louis, Missouri is calling us, and he wants to know if there's a possibility we can do next pay-per-view show be the Survivor Series 87, which went head-to-head with Starrcade 87, to see how the shows compare against each other. What do you think, Cheech?
I think that's a hell of an idea. You know, go back and review Survivor Series 1987. You know, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, you know, Vince McMahon put this show up against Starrcade 87 and kind of used his leverage to for the pay-per-view companies not to have it. So yeah, I think we should go back and watch Survivor Series 87 and see how it compared to this event.
Yeah, well, I gave Starrcade 87 a strong 7, so yeah, we can see how it compares. It'd be a It'd be great. So I think we can do the Survivor Series, Mr. Gibson. So don't worry about that. Our next pay-per-view show will be the Survivor Series debut in 1987.
Perfect. That sounds great. So yeah, Kern. So what else do we got?
Well, I want to let all our listeners know that if you got any questions or comments or feedback, please email us at cheechandkern@gmail.com.
That's right. That's right. You can also check our show out on iTunes. Please subscribe and leave it a review. Every time you guys leave a review on iTunes, it gets the show more recognition. It gets us out there. And we just want to keep getting the show out there. You know, everybody so far, the feedback we've been receiving, do like the format of the show, and I hope you guys keep enjoying it. So please just leave us a review on iTunes. It kind of helps us out. You can also stream us on Stitcher. We're on TuneIn Radio. We're on Stitcher, TuneIn, and everywhere podcasts are found. You guys can find our podcast on MP3. We also have an official YouTube channel. You guys could just search the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast, and it should pop right up for you guys. If you enjoy watching it on YouTube, we're thinking about having something fun on YouTube. Maybe we might have a couple of interviews we're trying to set up here, and we might have the video version on YouTube, and of course the MP3 version for iTunes and our streamers here. So you guys, stay tuned for that. But you can go on our YouTube channel and subscribe there also. And something very important here, we've opened a new wrestling forum for you guys to enjoy.
That's right.
We hope you guys could go and sign up. It's at cheechandkern.problords.com. You can find also our complete MP3 archive there. You can find our WCW Flashback City. You can find our, of course, all the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast episodes up there. And just so you guys know, the Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast, moving forward, we're going to be going up every Saturday night, Cheech and Kern Wrestling Podcast, and the WCW Flashback City is going to be going up every Monday night. So if you guys are tired of watching Monday Night Raw, the stale Monday Night Raw that's currently out there right now, you guys on Monday night can check out Cheech and Kern WCW Flashback City. As we mentioned before, we're going in chronological order from the first WCW Monday Nitro all the way to its end, and we're going Nitro, pay-per-view if necessary, Nitro, and we're going all the way. So our next WCW Flashback City is coming up this Monday, and it's going to be the second episode of WCW Monday Nitro.
So tune into this, guys. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. And I hope you guys, the feedback we have received for WCW Flashback City has also been great. So I hope you guys keep enjoying that. You can check us out there. And of course, as we mentioned before, keep sending your questions, comments, and feedback to cheechandkern@gmail.com. We read every one of them and answer your questions, of course, on the show. And finally, guys, I just want to thank you guys for downloading the show. We do this for fun. But it's great to see how the show has been evolving week by week, growing every week, and it's all because of you guys. So we want to thank you. Keep spreading the word. Keep getting Cheech and Kern out there. You can follow me on Twitter at Wrestling Cheech. We got that going there. I live blog from time to time when watching wrestling. If I'm bored, I just start tweeting. And so yeah, just get us out there and follow us on Twitter also.
That's right. Come on, guys. Let's get this rolling.
Let's get this rolling. So yeah, so remember, next Saturday night after this show, we're going up with WWF Survivor Series 1987. If you guys want, you could go to the wrestling forum, cheechandkern.probers.com, and you can write your thoughts on the Survivor Series 1987 show, or you could just send us directly your feedback to cheechandkern@gmail.com. Either way, we're going to be reviewing it and listening to it and talking about it on our next show.
That's
all right,
right.
Kern? So you got anything else?
Time.
It's closing time. Well, take care, guys. We'll catch you guys later.
Peace. I got nothing else. It's closing time.